Modes are probably the most common and misunderstood concepts that aspiring guitar players wish to master. You hear modes being talked about and used all the time by players like Steve Vai and Joe Satriani, but what I tend to see a lot is guitar players getting confused about what the term mode actually means. That's because there's such an overwhelming amount of instructional content available online regarding modes. So obviously not everyone that teaches it is going to have the same opinion. So you may have found yourself in a position where you've been taught the modes in several different ways, which is obviously going to be very confusing, especially if you're new to the concept. I'm going to offer my thoughts on modes and how you should approach them, and please remember that everything I say from this point onward is just my own personal opinion. So there are a few fundamental things that a worrying amount of guitar players should know but do not know before attempting to understand modes. Number one, they don't know what every note on the fretboard is. Guitar players seem to be one of the few groups of instrumentalists that are not taught this early on in their playing, which is actually just crazy when you think about it, because I guarantee you that there are very few, if any, piano players that do not know what every note on their instrument is. I personally did not learn how to memorize the notes of the fretboard early on in my playing. It's something that I actually taught myself a number of years ago because I realised what the benefits of it were, and those benefits include being able to identify root notes and intervals all across the fretboard. And this leads nicely into my next point. Number two, they don't know what intervals are. Again, another fundamental concept that all serious musicians should know before attempting to understand modes. An interval is the space between two notes, and intervals can be used to describe the construction of scales and modes. And scales and modes are all built from combinations of tones and semitones. A tone, if you were to look at it on one string, is the distance of 2 frets. So for example, from G to A, that's a tone. And a semitone, if you were to look at it on one string, is the distance of 1 fret, from G to A flat. So for example, the construction of the major scale is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. An example of the name of an interval would be a major second, which is equivalent to the distance of a tone when measured from the root note. So if I'm playing the G major scale, from G to A, that's the distance of a tone. And because I'm measuring it from the root note, that makes it a major second interval. So remember that intervals are always measured from the root note. And speaking of the major scale, let's talk about point number 3. They do not fully understand the construction of the major parent scale. Modes are derived from a parent scale. For example, the modes of the major scale, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, all use the same group of notes as the major parent scale. The difference, and what makes them modes, is the placement of the root note, which in turn changes the construction of the scale. For example, the first mode of the major scale is Ionian, and as mentioned previously, the construction of this scale is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, which sounds like this. However, if you take the second degree of the scale and measure the scale from this root note to its octave, which is A, then the construction of this scale, which would be called Dorian, is different from the construction of its parent scale, which is G major. The construction is now tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, tone. And take a look at how it compares to the construction of its parent scale. The same notes are all still there, but everything is measured from the second degree of the scale, which is treated as the root note. Now, if I'm playing in the key of G major, G is the root, it's the tonal center. And simply playing from A to A within the G major scale does not mean that I am playing the second mode of G major, which would be called A Dorian. All that would be is the G major scale with some emphasis on the note A, which is the second degree, and that would sound like this. if I play an A minor 7th chord and treat this as the tonal center and play the exact same notes as I did before, which sounds like this. Then I'm now playing an A Dorian mode, and that's because the construction of this mode means that it has a minor tonality, which of course works well when applied to a minor chord. So that's how I think about modes. They are different scales that are derived from the various degrees of their parent scale. And in my opinion, they only become modes when they are applied to keys with the same root note. For example, the mode A Dorian applied to the key of A minor. Obviously there's so much more that can be said on modes, so I may well end up doing a few more free videos on this topic. Leave a comment below if there's anything you didn't understand or if there's anything you disagree with. I want to know what your thoughts are on this topic, what your past experiences of learning modes were like, and how you personally interpret them. Let's get a discussion going. Everything I spoke about in this video, including knowing the notes of the fretboard, intervals, and the major scale, are covered in great depth in my upcoming online guitar course, Bulletproof Guitar Player. So please go ahead and subscribe to my channel or like my Facebook page and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for updates on the release. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.